I never imagined my sister Rebecca would stand up during my biggest investor presentation and announce that I was mentally unstable and she needed to protect the family business. Except it wasn't a family business, it was mine. I'm Alexandra, 29, and I spent 4 years building my tech startup from nothing into $1 million company. The betrayal that happened in that conference room, witnessed by some of the most powerful venture capitalists in Silicon Valley, nearly destroyed everything I'd worked for. But sometimes the worst betrayals lead to the most unexpected victories. Let me take you back to where this all began, because the seeds of that public humiliation were planted years earlier in our childhood home in suburban Portland. Growing up, Rebecca and I seemed like typical sisters on the surface. Our parents, Michael and Patricia Coleman, ran a successful accounting firm and provided a comfortable upper-middle-class lifestyle. We lived in a spacious colonial house, took family vacations to Lake Tahoe every summer, and both participated in various extracurricular activities. But beneath this normal facade, the dynamics between Rebecca and me were deeply imbalanced. From an early age, our personalities couldn't have been more different. I was the analytical one, fascinated by how things worked, spending hours taking apart electronics and teaching myself basic programming. Rebecca was what our parents diplomatically called people-focused, which really meant she excelled at manipulation and getting others to do things for her. While I spent my teenage years building websites for local businesses and saving every penny I earned, Rebecca cultivated an image of effortless popularity. She never held a job, instead focusing on maintaining her social status and expecting our parents to fund her lifestyle. When I pointed out this obvious favoritism, my mother would sigh and say, "Alexandra, you need to understand that Rebecca has different strengths. Not everyone can be as driven as you are." This pattern continued through high school. When I graduated valedictorian with early admission to Stanford, my parents organized a small family dinner. When Rebecca barely graduated 2 years later, they threw her a lavish party and took her on a month-long European vacation to celebrate her journey of self-discovery. At Stanford, I double-majored in computer science and business, working multiple jobs to minimize student loans while building my programming skills. Rebecca drifted through 3 different community colleges, changing majors whenever coursework became challenging. After my sophomore year, I started a small web development business, creating sites for restaurants and small retailers. By graduation, I had saved $50,000 and had a clear vision. I wanted to build a software company that would revolutionize how small businesses manage their inventory. "You work too much," Rebecca would comment during our increasingly rare family gatherings. "Life is about more than just coding and spreadsheets." By then, she had moved back home after dropping out of her latest college attempt, spending her days shopping and her evenings at trendy bars in downtown Portland. Despite her criticism, I remained focused. After graduation, I moved to San Francisco and rented a tiny studio apartment in the Mission District. For 18 months, I lived on ramen noodles and coffee while building the initial version of my software platform. I called it Inventory Flow, a cloud-based system that could predict ordering patterns, automate supplier communications, and integrate with existing point-of-sale systems. The breakthrough came when a local coffee shop owner let me install my beta software for free. Within 3 months, he had reduced his inventory costs by 30% and eliminated stockouts entirely. Word spread through the small business community, and soon I had a waiting list of potential customers. But launching a proper business required funding. I needed servers, staff, and marketing budget to scale beyond my one-person operation. I spent 6 months preparing a pitch deck, refining my business model, and researching potential investors. My goal was ambitious but achievable: raise $2 million in series of funding to hire a team and expand to 1,000 customers within 18 months. During this period, the familiar pattern of Rebecca's requests began escalating. "Alex, can I borrow your car for a few days? Mine's making weird noises." The car would return with mysterious scratches and an empty gas tank. "Alex, I need to use your credit card for this online course that will totally change my career trajectory. I'll pay you back as soon as I finish." The money never materialized. "Alex, can you spot me rent this month? I'm between opportunities right now." These loans were never repaid. The requests became more brazen as my business showed signs of success. During one particularly memorable family dinner, Rebecca suggested I needed better work-life balance and should consider bringing her on as a partner. I could handle all the people stuff while you focus on the technical things, she explained. We'd make a great team. I politely declined, explaining that I wasn't ready to take on partners and preferred to maintain control of my company's direction. Rebecca's expression darkened, but she said nothing more at the time. The real turning point came when TechCrunch featured inventory flow in an article about promising startup companies. The piece included details about my background, my bootstrapped approach, and projections for future growth. Suddenly, I was getting calls from venture capital firms interested in learning more. "You're famous," Rebecca exclaimed when she called after seeing the article. "This is so exciting. When do I get to meet all these important investors?" "It's just an article, Becca," I replied. "And this is still very early stage. Nothing's guaranteed." But privately, I was thrilled. 3 Tier 1 VC firms had requested meetings, and 2 smaller funds had already expressed serious interest. My 4 years of grinding were finally paying off. The first round of investor meetings went better than I had hoped. My financial projections were solid, my customer retention rates were impressive, and the market opportunity was enormous. Several firms expressed interest in leading a funding round, though the terms varied significantly. It was during this exciting period that Rebecca dropped her bombshell. She called one evening while I was reviewing term sheets, her voice unusually serious. "Alex, we need to talk about the business," she said. "What about it?" "I've been thinking about everything you've built, and I'm concerned about the stress you're under. You're working 18-hour days, you never socialize, and honestly, you seem kind of manic lately." I laughed, thinking she was joking. "I'm fine, Becca. This is what building a company looks like." "That's exactly what I'm worried about. You're so close to this that you can't see how it's affecting you. I think you need help managing everything." "I appreciate the concern, but I have everything under control." "Do you though? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're in over your head. These investors are going to expect professional management, not just technical skills." The conversation made me uncomfortable, but I dismissed it as Rebecca's usual tendency to insert herself into situations where she wasn't needed. A week later, I had a breakthrough meeting with Pinnacle Ventures, one of Silicon Valley's most respected firms. Partner Sarah Chun had spent 2 hours grilling me on every aspect of my business model, and her enthusiasm was evident. We scheduled a formal presentation for the following month, where I would present to their full investment committee. This could be it, I told my friend Marcus over dinner that night. Marcus had been my Stanford roommate and was now working at a tech company in Palo Alto. "Sarah thinks they might want to lead a $3 million round at a $15 million valuation." "That's incredible," he replied. "You've earned this, Alex. 4 years of living on nothing while building something real." But when I shared the news with my family, Rebecca's reaction was strange. "Are you sure you're ready for that kind of pressure?" she asked. "Managing investor expectations is really complicated. Maybe you should consider bringing in experienced partners before you get in too deep." I assured her I was prepared, but her comments planted a seed of doubt. Was I moving too fast? Was I in over my head? The preparation for the Pinnacle Ventures presentation consumed my life for the next 3 weeks. I rehearsed my pitch dozens of times, refined my financial projections, and prepared answers for every conceivable question. The presentation was scheduled for a Thursday morning at their Sand Hill Road offices, with 8 partners in attendance. 2 days before the presentation, Rebecca called with an unexpected request. "I want to come to your investor meeting," she announced.
"What? Why?"
"I want to support you, and I think it would be good for the investors to see that you have family backing. It shows stability." I explained that investor presentations weren't typically family affairs, but Rebecca persisted. She had researched Pinnacle Ventures and prepared talking points about my character and work ethic. Against my better judgment and worn down by her enthusiasm, I eventually agreed she could attend. The morning of the presentation, I arrived at Pinnacle's offices 90 minutes early to set up my laptop and review my notes one final time. The conference room overlooked Silicon Valley, its floor-to-ceiling windows offering a commanding view of the tech companies that had revolutionized the world. Rebecca arrived just as the Pinnacle partners were filing in. She looked professional in a tailored navy suit, carrying a leather portfolio that made her seem like a legitimate business associate. Sarah Chin introduced herself warmly, and Rebecca charmed the room with casual conversation about the beautiful offices and the exciting energy of the venture capital world. I began my presentation confidently, walking through the market opportunity, our solution, and early customer results. The partners asked thoughtful questions, and I could sense their growing interest. Everything was proceeding perfectly. Then I reached the slide about our growth strategy and future hiring plans. Over the next 18 months, we plan to hire 12 engineers, 4 sales representatives, and 3 customer success managers, I explained. This team will allow us to scale to 1,000 customers while maintaining our high service standards. That's when Rebecca stood up. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the conference room. "I need to interrupt for a moment." The room fell silent. 8 of Silicon Valley's most powerful investors turned to look at my sister, confused by this unprecedented disruption. "Rebecca, what are you doing?" I asked, my voice tight with alarm. "I'm protecting our family," she replied, then turned to address the partners directly. "I'm Alexandra's sister, and I love her dearly, but I have serious concerns about her mental state and her ability to manage investor funds responsibly." The words hit me like a physical blow. Several partners exchanged glances, their expressions shifting from confusion to concern. "As you can see," Rebecca continued, "Alexandra has been working obsessively on this project for years. She has no work-life balance, no personal relationships, and honestly, I'm worried she's having some kind of breakdown. She's been talking about expanding rapidly and spending millions of dollars, but she's never managed a team larger than herself." "Rebecca, stop," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I can't stop, Alex. Someone needs to speak up before you make a terrible mistake. These gentlemen are considering investing millions of dollars, and they deserve to know that you're not equipped to handle that responsibility." Sarah Chin looked between Rebecca and me, clearly uncertain how to proceed. "Miss Coleman, perhaps we should discuss this privately." "No," Rebecca interrupted. "This needs to be said now, in front of everyone. Alexandra has always been brilliant with technology, but she has zero experience with people management, financial oversight, or handling pressure. I've watched her become increasingly erratic over the past few months. She barely eats, she doesn't sleep, and she's completely isolated herself from family and friends." I stood frozen, watching 4 years of work crumble in real time. The partners were no longer looking at me as a promising entrepreneur, but as a potential liability. "Furthermore," Rebecca continued, "I think this company needs experienced leadership if it's going to succeed. As Alexandra's sister and someone who has been supporting her throughout this process, I believe I should take on a significant role in the company's management to ensure investor funds are properly stewarded." The audacity of her statement broke me out of my paralysis. "Excuse me? I have a business degree and extensive experience in client relations," Rebecca said, maintaining eye contact with Sarah Chin. "I could serve as COO while Alexandra focuses on the technical aspects she's good at." "Rebecca, you don't have a business degree?" I said, my voice growing stronger. "You dropped out of 3 different programs, and you've never held a full-time job in your life." A flush crept up Rebecca's neck. "I have practical experience." "Working where?" I demanded. "Name one company where you've worked for more than 3 months." The room was completely silent now, the partners watching this family drama unfold with apparent fascination and horror. "This is exactly what I'm talking about," Rebecca said, her voice taking on a wounded tone. "You're becoming defensive and erratic. You can't handle any criticism or oversight." "Criticism?" I laughed, the sound harsh in the quiet room. "You just told 8 investors that I'm mentally unstable and incompetent, then suggested you should run my company despite having 0 qualifications. That's not criticism, that's sabotage." Sarah Chin finally intervened. "I think we should pause this presentation," she said diplomatically. "Miss Coleman, Why don't you take some time to resolve this family matter privately, and we can reschedule when you're ready? I wanted to object, to explain that this was Rebecca's attempt to hijack my company, but the damage was already done. The partners were gathering their materials and filing out, their faces carefully neutral, but their body language conveying clear discomfort. As the room emptied, Rebecca turned to me with tears in her eyes. "I did this because I love you," she said. "You would have failed, and I couldn't watch that happen." "Get out," I said quietly. "Alex, get out," I shouted, my voice echoing off the conference room walls. After Rebecca left, I sat alone in the empty room, staring out at Silicon Valley through those floor-to-ceiling windows. For years of work, potentially destroyed by 10 minutes of family sabotage. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah Chin. "Let's talk once things settle down. This doesn't have to be the end." But I knew it might be. Word would spread quickly through the tight-knit venture capital community about the entrepreneur whose sister had declared her mentally unstable during a pitch meeting. Future investors would have questions, doubts, concerns about family stability and personal judgment. The drive back to my apartment passed in a blur. Once home, I poured myself a large glass of wine and tried to process what had happened. My phone showed 17 missed calls from my parents and a series of increasingly frantic texts from Rebecca. I was trying to help. "You would have failed anyway. At least now we can fix this together. Why won't you answer my calls?" I turned off my phone and spent the evening staring at my laptop screen, wondering if my startup dreams were over before they had really begun. But sometimes the worst moments plant seeds for the best outcomes, and this public humiliation would eventually lead to an opportunity one never could have imagined. The next morning brought a cascade of consequences from Rebecca's conference room sabotage. I woke to 43 missed calls and 28 text messages from family members, each more dramatic than the last. My mother's voicemail was particularly painful. "Alexandra, your sister called us in tears. She says you screamed at her in front of investors after she tried to help you. This behavior is exactly what she was worried about. You need to call us immediately." Rebecca had apparently spent the evening crafting her version of events, positioning herself as the concerned sister who had tried to save me from embarrassment. The narrative she spun was masterful in its manipulation. I was overworked, mentally unstable, and unable to accept help from family who only wanted what was best for me. I spent the day fielding damage control calls. Sarah Chun from Pinnacle Ventures was diplomatic but clear. "We're going to need some time to process yesterday's meeting. Perhaps we can reconnect in a few weeks once you've had a chance to address the concerns that were raised." Two other VCs who had been interested in setting up meetings sent polite emails postponing our discussions until your company structure is more clearly defined. Marcus drove down from Palo Alto that evening, bringing Chinese takeout and moral support. "This is insane," he said after I explained what had happened. "Rebecca literally sabotaged your presentation because she wanted to take over your company?" "That's what it looks like," I replied, pushing lo mein around my plate without much appetite. "And the worst part is, she's convinced herself she was helping." "What are you going to do?" I had been wrestling with that question all day. My first instinct was to cut Rebecca out of my life entirely, but she was still family. My parents were already pressuring me to work things out and not let business destroy family relationships. "I don't know," I admitted. "Maybe I should just focus on growing the business organically without venture funding. It'll be slower, but at least I won't have to worry about family interference." Marcus shook his head. "You can't let her win like this. You've built something incredible, and you deserve the funding to scale it properly." Over the next week, I tried to return to normal operations, focusing on my existing customers and product development. But the psychological damage from Rebecca's betrayal was significant. Every time I spoke with a potential customer or partner, I wondered if they had heard about the investor meeting disaster. Then, on Friday afternoon, I received an unexpected call from a number I didn't recognize. "Ms. Coleman? This is David Kim from Apex Capital Partners. I heard about your presentation at Pinnacle, and I'd like to meet with you." My heart sank. Word was spreading faster than I had feared. "Mr. Kim, I appreciate your interest, but if you're calling because of what happened..." "I'm calling because of what happened to you," Not because of what you did, he interrupted. I've been in this industry for 15 years, and I've never heard of a family member sabotaging a pitch meeting like that. It tells me you must have built something pretty valuable for someone to go to such lengths to try to control it. David explained that he was a managing partner at Apex, a smaller but highly respected fund that specialized in early-stage enterprise software companies. He had reviewed my pitch deck and financial projections through a mutual connection and was impressed by my traction and business model. The question is, he continued, are you ready to build something without family interference? Because what I saw at Pinnacle suggests you might have some boundary issues to address. His directness was refreshing after a week of diplomatic deflection from other investors. Mr. Kim, that situation was a complete anomaly. My sister has never been involved in my business, and she never will be again. Good. Can you meet Tuesday at 2 p.m.? I'd like to hear your pitch without any family drama. After hanging up, I felt the first spark of hope since Rebecca's ambush. Maybe this disaster could be overcome after all. Tuesday's meeting with David Kim couldn't have been more different from the Pinnacle presentation. David's office was smaller and less imposing, decorated with photos of his portfolio companies rather than Silicon Valley landmarks. He listened to my pitch without interruption, asked sharp technical questions, and seemed genuinely excited about inventory flow's potential. Your sister did you a favor, he said at the end of our meeting. She revealed a fundamental truth about your business. It's strong enough to survive family sabotage. That's actually a pretty good stress test. David explained that Apex was interested in leading a $2.5 million Series A round, contingent on due diligence, and a few key conditions. One of those conditions was implementing proper corporate governance to prevent future family interference. I want you to establish a board of directors with clear bylaws about company control, he said. I also want legal documentation that prevents family members from having any claims on the business unless they're formal employees or investors. The terms were fair, and David's approach was exactly what I needed: supportive but protective, enthusiastic but realistic. We shook hands and agreed to begin the due diligence process immediately. That evening, I called Marcus to share the good news. David Kim sounds amazing, he said. Way better than dealing with a larger fund where you'd just be one of dozens of investments. But I also knew I needed to address the family situation before moving forward. The stress of wondering when Rebecca might strike again was affecting my focus and decision-making. I decided to have one final conversation with her to set clear boundaries. We met at a coffee shop near my apartment, neutral territory where she couldn't create a scene. Rebecca arrived looking haggard, her usual polished appearance replaced by dark circles and nervous energy. I've been waiting for you to call, she said before I could speak. We need to discuss how to fix the situation with those investors. There's nothing to fix, I replied calmly. I have new investors who are interested in funding my company. My company, not our company. Rebecca's expression hardened. Alex, you can't seriously be planning to shut me out after everything that happened. I was trying to protect you from making a huge mistake. By telling investors I was mentally unstable? By pointing out legitimate concerns about your readiness for that level of responsibility, she shot back. Those Pinnacle people would have given you millions of dollars and then demanded results you couldn't deliver. I saved you from inevitable failure. The depth of her delusion was staggering. She had genuinely convinced herself that sabotaging my biggest opportunity was an act of love. Rebecca, I need you to understand something very clearly, I said. You will never have any role in my company. You will never meet my investors, employees, or customers. If you attempt to interfere with my business again in any way, I will pursue legal action. Her face flushed red. You can't talk to me like that. I'm your sister. You're my sister who destroyed my investor presentation and then claimed you should run my company despite having no qualifications. Family doesn't give you the right to sabotage my career. I have qualifications, she protested. I have ideas and connections, and name one business you've successfully run, I interrupted. One project you've completed. One job you've held for more than 6 months. The silence stretched between us, filled with 29 years of accumulated resentment and disappointment. Fine, Rebecca finally said, her voice cold. Build your little company. But don't come crying to me when it all falls apart because you were too proud to accept help." She stormed out of the coffee shop, and I felt a strange sense of relief. The conversation had been painful, but necessary. I had finally set the boundaries that should have been established years earlier. The due diligence process with Apex Capital moved quickly. David's team was thorough but efficient, reviewing my financials, customer contracts, and technology architecture. They interviewed key customers and verified my growth projections. Most importantly, they helped me establish the corporate governance structure that would protect my company from future family interference. 6 weeks after Rebecca's sabotage at Pinnacle, I signed the Series A funding agreement with Apex Capital. The $2.5 million investment would allow me to hire the team I needed and scale inventory flow to serve thousands of customers. The signing ceremony was held at Apex's offices on a bright Thursday morning. David invited the local tech press, and several industry executives attended to show support for another promising startup launching in the Bay Area. As I signed the documents that would transform my company from a solo operation into a funded growth business, I thought about the journey that had brought me to this moment. Rebecca's betrayal had been devastating, but it had also forced me to clarify my priorities and strengthen my resolve. "Any regrets?" David asked as photographers captured the moment. "Just one," I replied. "I wish I had set better boundaries with my family years ago." The funding announcement generated significant media attention. TechCrunch ran a follow-up story about my company's resilience, and several industry publications covered the Series A as an example of successful bootstrap-to-funding growth. My parents called after seeing the news coverage, their tone notably different from our previous conversations. "Congratulations, sweetheart," my mother said. "We're very proud of what you've accomplished." "Thank you," I replied carefully. "About what happened with Rebecca?" my father began. "Dad, I don't want to rehash that situation. I've moved forward, and I hope she can too." There was a pause before my mother spoke again. "She's been struggling since the investor meeting. She feels terrible about how things went." I almost laughed at the revisionist history. Rebecca felt terrible about being excluded from the success, not about sabotaging my presentation. "I hope she finds something fulfilling to focus on," I said diplomatically. "But it won't involve my company." The conversation ended cordially, but with clear understanding that the family dynamics had permanently shifted. I was no longer the accommodating sister who would sacrifice my own interests to keep the peace. Over the following months, inventory flow grew rapidly. We hired talented engineers, expanded our customer base, and began developing additional product features. The office we leased in Soma became a hub of creative energy, filled with brilliant people working toward a shared vision. David proved to be an excellent investor and advisor, providing strategic guidance without micromanaging day-to-day operations. The other board members brought valuable expertise in sales, marketing, and operations, helping me navigate challenges I had never faced as a solo founder. Rebecca made one final attempt to insert herself into my success story. She contacted a reporter at a business magazine working on a profile of successful female entrepreneurs, claiming to be my business partner and sister and offering insights into my journey. The reporter, being professional, fact-checked Rebecca's claims and called me directly. "Ms. Coleman, I have someone claiming to be your business partner, but your corporate filings don't show any partners. Can you clarify?" I explained the situation briefly and professionally, providing contact information for David Kim if the reporter needed to verify my company's actual structure. The article ran without any mention of Rebecca, focusing instead on my technical background and the challenges of building enterprise software as a solo founder. A year after the series of funding, inventory flow had grown to 50 employees and was serving over 2,000 customers across North America. We were preparing for a Series B funding round that would value the company at over $50 million. During this period, I received an unexpected email from Rebecca. The subject line read, "Congratulations and apology." "Alex," she wrote, "I've been following your company's success in the news, and I want you to know how proud I am of what you've built. I also want to apologize for my behavior during your investor presentation. I realize now that I was acting out of jealousy and fear of being left behind. I never should have interfered with your business, and I'm sorry for the damage I caused. I hope someday we can have a relationship again, but I understand if you need more time. Love, Rebecca. The message was surprisingly mature and self-aware, suggesting that perhaps she had done some genuine reflection over the past year. I drafted several responses, but ultimately decided to let some more time pass before engaging. 3 months later, we closed our Series B funding round led by Sequoia Capital, raising $15 million at a $60 million valuation. The milestone was covered extensively in the tech press, cementing Inventory Flow's position as a major player in the enterprise software space. The celebration party was held at a rooftop venue overlooking San Francisco Bay, with employees, investors, customers, and industry friends gathering to mark the achievement. As I stood before the crowd to give a brief speech, I reflected on the journey that had brought us to this point. 2 years ago, I told the assembled group, someone very close to me told a room full of investors that I was mentally unstable and unfit to run a company. At the time, I thought that person had destroyed my dreams. Tonight, I want to thank her for giving me the motivation to prove her wrong. The crowd laughed and applauded, not knowing the full story, but appreciating the sentiment about overcoming adversity. David Kim found me after the speech. You know, he said, your sister really did you a favor. The companies that survive family drama are usually the ones built to last. 6 months later, Inventory Flow was acquired by Salesforce for $300 million. The exit provided substantial returns for our investors and life-changing outcomes for our employees through equity compensation. As I cleaned out my office after the acquisition closed, I found Rebecca's apology email printed and filed in my desk drawer. On impulse, I called her. Alex, she answered, surprise evident in her voice.
But
I saw your email from last year. Thank you for the apology. I wasn't sure you'd ever want to talk to me again, she said quietly. I needed time to process everything that happened, but I've realized that holding on to anger was hurting me more than it was hurting you. We talked for an hour, honestly and openly in a way we hadn't since childhood. Rebecca had used the past 2 years to examine her own patterns and motivations, including therapy to address her tendencies toward manipulation and entitlement. I was so jealous of your success, she admitted. You always knew what you wanted and went after it, while I just drifted and expected things to work out. When you started getting recognition for your company, I couldn't handle feeling so left behind. I understand that now, I replied. But next time you're struggling with jealousy, maybe try talking to me instead of sabotaging my biggest presentation. She laughed, and for a moment, we sounded like sisters again. Today, 3 years after the Salesforce acquisition, I'm working on my second company while serving as an angel investor for other female entrepreneurs. Rebecca has found her own path as a social media consultant for small businesses, building on her natural people skills in a more constructive way. We have dinner once a month when I'm in Portland visiting our parents. The relationship isn't what it was before. There's a wariness that probably won't ever fully disappear, but it's healthier than it's ever been. We both understand our boundaries and respect them. The penthouse apartment I bought with some of my acquisition proceeds overlooks the Golden Gate Bridge, a daily reminder of how far I've come from that tiny Mission District studio where I built my first company. But the view I treasure most is the one looking forward, toward the next challenge, the next opportunity to build something meaningful. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if Rebecca hadn't sabotaged that Pinnacle Ventures presentation. Would I have ended up with a different investor who was less supportive? Would I have grown the company too quickly without proper governance? Would I have learned the hard lessons about family boundaries that proved so valuable? There's no way to know, but I'm grateful for the path that led me here. The sister who tried to destroy my business in front of 50 investors actually gave me the greatest gift possible, the motivation to succeed on my own terms, with clear boundaries and unwavering determination. The most important lesson I learned isn't about building companies or managing investors. It's about the difference between family loyalty and family dysfunction. True family support lifts you up and respects your autonomy. Anything else is just manipulation wearing the mask of love. If you're dealing with family members who try to control your success or sabotage your dreams, know that setting boundaries isn't selfish, it's essential. You can love someone while refusing to let them destroy what you've built. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is say no and mean it. My company succeeded not despite family interference, but because I finally learned to protect it from family interference. That's a lesson worth more than any investment round or acquisition price. The best revenge, as they say, is massive success. But the best outcome is building something so strong that no one can tear it down, not even the people who share your DNA. Have you ever had to protect your professional life from family interference? How did you handle it? Share your experiences in the comments below, and remember that your dreams are worth defending, even from the people closest to you. The conference room on the 47th floor of Salesforce Tower was bathed in San Francisco morning light as I, Alexandra Coleman, now 37, prepared for the most important presentation of my career. This time, I wasn't pitching my own company, but rather Coleman Ventures, a $200 million venture capital fund I had founded after the successful sale of Inventory Flow. Around the oval table sat representatives from pension funds, family offices, and institutional investors, each considering investments ranging from $10 to $50 million in my new fund. The irony wasn't lost on me. 5 years ago, my sister had tried to convince investors I was mentally unstable and unfit to manage money. Today, I was asking some of the world's largest institutions to trust me with hundreds of millions of dollars. As you can see from our track record, I said, clicking to the next slide, our thesis of investing in female-founded enterprise software companies has generated consistent returns. Our portfolio companies have achieved an average 40% annual growth rate, with 3 successful exits in just 18 months. David Kim, now my co-managing partner at Coleman Ventures, nodded approvingly from the corner of the room. After Apex Capital's stellar returns from Inventory Flow, he had joined me to launch this new fund focused on backing underrepresented founders in enterprise technology. But the real surprise guest was sitting quietly in the back row, taking notes on a tablet. Rebecca Colma Martinez, 35, now bore my sister's married name and wore the professional confidence of someone who had built something meaningful of her own. Her social media consultancy had grown into a 50-person agency representing Fortune 500 clients, and she was here as a potential limited partner, representing her company's investment arm. Questions asked as I concluded the presentation. Margaret Phillips from CalPERS raised her hand. Ms. Coleman, I have to ask about the elephant in the room. We've all heard the story about your sister's intervention during your first major funding round. How do we know that kind of family drama won't affect your judgment as a fund manager? The room fell silent. This was the question I had been expecting and dreading for 5 years. I looked directly at Rebecca, who gave me an almost imperceptible nod of encouragement. That's a fair question, I replied. 5 years ago, my sister believed she was protecting me from failure by sabotaging what she saw as an overwhelming opportunity. Today, she's sitting in this room as a successful entrepreneur in her own right, considering a significant investment in our fund. The difference isn't just that we've both grown professionally, it's that we've learned to respect each other's expertise and boundaries. Rebecca stood up, which caused several investors to shift uncomfortably in their seats. The last time she had stood up during one of my presentations, it had been a disaster. May I add something? She asked. I hesitated for a microsecond, then nodded. 5 years ago, I made the biggest mistake of my life by trying to control my sister's success instead of celebrating it, Rebecca said, her voice steady and professional. That mistake taught me that true family support means believing in someone's capabilities, not questioning them. Alexandra has since become one of Silicon Valley's most respected operators and angel investors. My agency is proud to be investing $5 million in Coleman Ventures because I've learned to trust my sister's judgment completely. The transformation was remarkable. The insecure, manipulative person who had once tried to hijack my company had evolved into someone who could publicly acknowledge her mistakes and express genuine confidence in my abilities. After the investors filed out, promising decisions within 2 weeks, Rebecca and I found ourselves alone in the conference room. Thank you, I said simply. Thank you for giving me the chance to make it right, she replied. Though I have to admit, investing in your fund isn't just about family loyalty. Your returns speak for themselves." We both laughed, and I realized this moment represented something I had never imagined possible 5 years ago. A professional relationship with my sister built on mutual respect rather than family obligation. "You know," Rebecca continued, "sometimes I wonder if that disaster at Pinnacle was the best thing that ever happened to both of us. You learned to set boundaries, I learned to respect them, and we both learned what we were really capable of when we stopped trying to control each other." Looking out at the San Francisco skyline, where dozens of my portfolio companies were building the future, I had to agree. The sister, who had once tried to destroy my business, had become one of my most important investors. The presentation that had nearly ended my entrepreneurial dreams had taught me lessons that made possible everything that followed. In 2 weeks, we would close Coleman Ventures' first fund at $250 million, $50 million over our target, thanks largely to Rebecca's investment and the credibility her public support had provided with other family offices. But the real victory wasn't the fund size or the investor interest. It was sitting in that conference room with my sister, both of us successful on our own terms, choosing to work together because we wanted to, not because family dynamics demanded it. 5 years ago, Rebecca had asked a room full of investors whether I could handle the pressure of managing their money. Today, she had helped me prove that I could handle something far more complex, turning family dysfunction into family success, with boundaries intact and respect earned. The best partnerships, I've learned, are built not on blood relations or shared history, but on mutual competence and aligned interests. Sometimes it takes a spectacular failure to discover what real collaboration looks like. As we packed up our materials and prepared to leave Salesforce Tower, I realized that the story I had been telling for 5 years about overcoming family sabotage to achieve business success was incomplete. The real story was about two sisters who learned to see each other clearly, respect each other's capabilities, and build something together that neither could have achieved alone. The revenge had evolved into partnership. The betrayal had become the foundation for trust. And the sister who had once tried to take over my company had become my strongest advocate for taking over an entire industry. That, perhaps, was the most successful exit of all.